We'll call this meeting to order and welcome our county commissioners to the town of Lyons. Great opportunity to sit down and with a new board and meet the commissioners and vice versa. And I think the first thing is welcome and introduction. So welcome here, and we'll just go around and each of us quickly introduce ourselves.
Sure. I'm Julie Jacobs, brand new commissioner. I was on PCDC for a while, and then I was on the IGA task force and then on Housing and Human Services Commission. So that's sort of the backwards trajectory. Now I'm back on Housing and Human Services as the liaison, so that's great. I'm a psychologist and attorney. I have a small practice here in Lyons, so I'm here all day, every day, helping folks around the state do their jobs.
That is awesome. You can tell us why we all behave the way we do after the meeting. You can explain it to us.
Think about it and use it.
All right, help us out.
Okay.
I'm Ashley Stolzman. I'm one of the commissioners. I come from District 3, which is Southeast Boulder County. Before I was a commissioner, I was the mayor of Louisville on Louisville City Council. And so I love the small town efforts and work and really appreciate it from my time there. And before that, I did chemical engineering at a factory on the diagonal between Longmont and Boulder.
I'm Martha Luchman. I'm also one of the Boulder County Commissioners. Thanks for hosting us and for having us, and congratulations. It was great to hear a little bit about each of you and understand kind of the basis of why you're doing the work that you're doing. I am in Longmont. I live in Longmont, so this is part of my district, quote unquote, because we serve all Boulder County residents, as y'all know. This is my 6th year on the commission. I know, it's, COVID, Marshall Fire, mass shooting in Boulder, like all the things that happened for us and communities, of course. And my background is teaching. My background is real estate. And my background is doing consulting work, but really focused on monolingual Spanish speakers and the barriers of access to services, programs, and resources that still exist today in the state of Colorado and around the country. So that's a little bit about the work that I do and why I'm so involved in housing. And some of the other work that I'm involved in, but it's great to see you. And I'm guessing some of us will get to do a little additional work on the Lura as well. So pleasure to meet you.
Great. And I'm Claire Lady. I am also in my 6th year as a commissioner, elected in 2020, re-elected in 2024. I live in Boulder, so of the 3 districts, I'm Boulder, Longmont, East County. I am an attorney by training, still a licensed attorney. Before becoming county commissioner, I was the executive director of the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, which was it's a policy advocacy organization that works on issues around access to healthcare, barriers to economic security. We put out sort of every 3 years, the self-sufficiency standard that some jurisdictions use to peg their living wage. So did a lot of policy research, policy advocacy in the state legislature. I was a member of the state legislature before becoming the executive director of CCLP. And before that, I was a practicing attorney and have lived in Boulder County since 1986, so 40 years.
I'm Lee Williams. You might recall that I, for work, am an affordable housing developer. I have a few small scale projects, we like to call them, including one here in Lyons. We're moving somebody today. One up in Allen's Park where I was painting today. I don't think they have white paint on me as I did 20 minutes ago. I'm also a volunteer firefighter here. So you can imagine that I care a lot about housing and about fire mitigation and about all the things that all of us care about. Before I came to town about 10 years ago, I spent most of my career in risk management. I was chief risk officer for a big company and then at a think tank and then at the Treasury Department. So I also tend to think about how things could go sideways and what we can do to keep that from happening or to address it if it does.
Hi, I'm Mariah McCleary. I have a background in physics and permaculture design. I am currently working with a nonprofit that's expanding pollinator habitat in the town of Lyons, but also up and down the Front Range. And I'm running the Lyons Farmers Market. Cool. Yeah. Short and sweet. Thank you.
I'm Greg Lowell. I think I've met each of you in some capacity. I'm on my third term, albeit not consecutive, as a Lyons trustee. My background is I worked for 30 years back in New Hampshire as a communications person for a defense company. That's publications, media, employee communications. But also back there, I served briefly on a school board, and I was heavily involved in land conservation issues. I was on the board of a couple land conservation organizations. So my bent tends to be towards land preservation and conservation, ecology and all things. Moved out here about 14 years ago to be with all three of my kids who decided Colorado was better than New Hampshire. So I'm here.
Smart kid.
Raising it right.
Amy Schwartz, I'm a new trustee. I served on the planning commission for about 2.5 years and chaired it the last year. And my career has mostly been kind of in public education, working for nonprofits, universities and so forth. But the last 20 years that I've been here in Lyons and in Colorado, I've worked for Oakwood Homes. I ran their educational foundation for 17 years and have been switched to the corporate side and helping them create public-private partnerships with local governments to deepen affordability. So,
And I'm Mark Browning. I've been mayor of Lyons for 9 days now. For 6 years before that, off and on, I was on the board of trustees, and prior to that, I had a former life as an attorney in Texas, but I reformed and moved to Colorado and dropped my law license. So got here in time for the flood and got involved in town stuff there and have been ever since. So looking forward to working with the commissioners and my fellow trustees and the town staff and the commission staff to get a lot of things done in the coming year. Then the next thing on the agenda is wildfire mitigation, and I think I'll let commissioners deal with that because the Wildfire Partners program has been successful and we're partnering in Lyons, and so you can tell us where that is now and what's coming in the future, I guess.
I did. I wore the shirt to win extra.
Yeah.
So just, and I know we'll all likely have things we want to share on this topic, but Wildfire Partners is the Boulder County's program that really looks at wildfire mitigation and preparedness for the next fire that we know is coming. The commissioners, we just adopted our updated WUI code with the new state code requirements. It required some amendments to our existing code. And the biggest area of change, in my opinion, is that it extends the area where landscaping mitigation, where, you know, around the house is extended into the plains to about approximately 95th Street, if you were to take that line and sort of draw it across the county. So in the past, it was more in the forested area, and it extends that vegetation management down into the plains, which is going to be a bit of a learning curve for people. And as we all likely know, it's primarily on new builds and significant remodels. But I do anticipate that community members, there'll be some bit of a learning curve, like if you go to redo your deck, and then it requires some additional vegetation management, that can come as a surprise for some people. So there's still a big education component on that, making sure the community understands that when you pull building permits for various things, there are new requirements statewide. So some learning curve there. For our Wildfire Partners program, it is throughout the county. There are different things in different parts of the county to try to target the specific needs of the different geographies. But we are doing another rebate program this year. The staff continue to evaluate the effectiveness, and we get a lot of questions of why don't you include this? Why don't you include that in the rebates? And the way that the staff have sort of framed it is it's looking to incentivize something that would not happen but for the rebate. So one that comes up often is like, well, siding, like, could I get the $500 rebate when I do my $50,000 siding project? And our evaluation is that it's unlikely that that $500 is the thing that's going to just make you decide to do that siding project. So you likely were going to do that anyway. And so since we're using collective tax dollars, we want to inspire something that wouldn't happen if it were not for the funding. So when you see the list of things, it may not include some of those really high dollar things because it is $500. It's to try to get people to be inspired to do a project that'll really help the whole community reduce our fire risk with a project they would not have done otherwise. There's funding that the staff targets for community groups also. So like for the watershed groups, for HOAs, for nonprofits that where they can propose things, and get funding in that way. There are outreach and education events. A lot of this is really about education and information sharing so that people are able to take steps to help protect the community, can do it. So the staff have tabling events, they come into the community, they come to farmers markets, to different activities to provide information to community members about the steps they can take on their property. And then there are some programs that are really targeted at multifamily. So in 2025, the team actually went in with staff and contractors and removed 3,456 juniper bushes from multifamily. And you can all remember that number too. You just, start on three. You just start on three and then 4, 5, 6. That's it. But they removed that many. If you think of how they're very hard to remove, it can be very overwhelming. And in some of the multifamily areas, it can be complicated to understand like whose responsibility it is, particularly if HOAs have dissolved or if there's a complicated structure or just not affordability to get them removed. So we're really proud of the team for trying to focus on areas that people either need a little bit of extra support because of financial reasons or because there's a complicated structure in place that would make it hard for them. They are trying to focus on landscape scale changes. So, if I do something at my house, it's one thing, but if my whole neighborhood does something, it has a bigger landscape effect. So you'll see some of the education campaigns are targeted in that way too. And individual action is still really important at the end of the day. So I think I'll stop there and then pass the baton over for things that you all wanted to highlight in that also.
I don't have anything to add in regards to the mitigation. If there's questions that people have, we might have another perspective, but we have only an hour to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I saw on the agenda is update and information on what's available to the town of Lyons. And the opportunity countywide to have groups of neighbors get together and decide that they want to do a slash chipping program together. I think the minimum is 5 neighbors, and the county will schedule to come out and do a chipping program for you. We have some services that when we have youth corps folks working for us to help low income homeowners or renters who don't have the means to do some of this wildfire mitigation on their own. We'll come out, we'll do an assessment, we'll determine whether you're eligible through this low income program, which is great because really, can be expensive. I guess the assessment that folks will do just, to go around and say, trim this tree or take this mulch out or do all this stuff, that's available countywide. So of course it's available to residents of the town of Lyons. Am I missing anything there? Yeah, and then with questions or.
I would add that in the town of Lyons, both last year and this year, we have matched locally the $500 so that for Lyons residents, they have $1,000 available to them for individual property mitigation. And we couldn't have done that without the county wildfire partner staff doing the initial evaluation and list of things to be done. We don't have the staffing for that and the expertise. And so that critical step of doing the initial evaluation and creating a checklist of things that can be reimbursed, we rely on the county for. And then our reimbursement is dependent on showing us that you did the county evaluation and what you've completed and everything has worked well. And then on a broader level, the county provided us, I believe, a $40,000 grant this year that we are also matching $40,000. That was county funds, correct? That will focus on town-owned properties and cleaning up we have a lot of parks and open space land. So we will be devoting we have $80,000 budget, I should say, to do cleanup. That's also basically a joint effort between the county and the town.
I just want to acknowledge that you turning to Victoria. Jen Peterson, our county administrator, is here, and Natalie Springett, our deputy commissioner.
Nice to meet you all.
And I've got a question I'd like to throw to the table. It's something we've already discussed here locally as a board, which is how far, and Commissioner Stolzman was on the statewide task force as well. We discussed this with our local task force. How far do we think that voluntary incentives can take us in getting community-wide fire risk mitigation measures that will actually have an impact? And the study that we did was Vail has been doing generous incentives for like 10 years now. And they're some ways similar to Lyons in that they're a mostly built out town on the edge of mountains and woods and everything. And they're not yet at the 20% participation level. So I guess I'll throw that out as a question. How far can you take it on a voluntary basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's never too early to speculate. I'm happy to speculate on the question.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think it calls for some speculation.
It does.
But I think in order to have, like, if you wanted to go down the course of having a regulatory framework, there has to be some level of community acceptance for any type of regulation. So there's a necessary education and buy-in component. Anytime a tree comes out, there's a lot of emotional sentiment. And our community in particular cares deeply for the environment and the life of plants and all of those things. So there is certainly while wildfire mitigation is critical for healthy forests, for all the things, and we can all rationally understand that still doesn't eliminate the issue if like the tree that grandma planted has to come out. So education is sort of a first step in my perspective before like moving forward and getting to some sort of critical mass of acceptance. And I think we are beyond like the initial critical mass numbers when you think of change management, and I should turn to the psychologist, but you know, I think we're beyond the 30% acceptance of the concept. So people are willing to buy in that. Like when we did, I don't know if you guys have done your code update yet for the, when we did ours, we didn't have people come shaking their fists at us. It was very straightforward. So that indicates to me that I think people understand the need, are willing to accept that there's some additional cost to comply and do this, that the cost is worth that expense because the cost of inaction would be greater. So I think we're past that. I don't think we're to the point where you could say, for example, I'm not saying anyone has suggested this, but if we were to suggest that people had to replace existing siding without a project that they had planned, I don't think we're at a place we could mandate something like that. It's far too great of an expense, for someone to bear with no plan. So if we were to, like, for example, in the city of Boulder, they required roofs, wood shingle roofs to be eliminated, and they gave a 20-year amortization period to be able to come into compliance. So if we were to get to the point where we wanted to do something around structure hardening that would cause significant investment, I think we would need to consider an amortization schedule that allowed people time to plan the financing around such a big investment. So I sort of didn't answer your question, but I think there has to be enough community buy-in and support before we can move to more rigid measures. One community that has done a great job to turn to and look at how they've done it, and it's sort of not fair because they have resources that are far in excess of what any of us could ever do, but is Aspen. And their fire district inspects every property and provides feedback about what needs to be done. And like, it is having it come from a fire official is very